pronunciation of their name paid homage to their false deity. Marry right, young people. You can't just marry anyone. You have to marry the one that God chose for you. Shortly after marrying Jezebel, King Ahab made Baal worship, the national religion of Israel, and built a temple for people to engage in idolatrous worship. Ahab and Jezebel didn't come into power out of nowhere. Israel's history of corruption made a way for them to come in with a greater corruption. For this reason, God broke the nation of Israel into two. Israel being the northern kingdom and Judah being the southern kingdom. From the beginning, Jeroboam, the first ruler of the northern kingdom, led the people into idol worship. To keep the people from going to Jerusalem to worship, he led them to worship the golden calf. Basically, he pulled a political move because he wanted to keep people dedicated to him, keep people in his kingdom. So he created a religious system of his own to keep people from going to Jerusalem, because Jerusalem is the religious capital. And they are commanded to go to Jerusalem for the appointed days and the feasts. So he already have set himself against God. Needless to say, this angered God to the point he cut off the bloodline of Jeroboam from the throne. After a period of time, Ahab and his wife Jezebel came to the throne. The Bible said that Ahab was more wicked than all the previous kings of Israel. He and his wife did an evil thing in the sight of God by merging the Israelite religion with that of a foreign deity. Israel was led to believe that Yahweh and Baal were one and the same. Of course, there were prophets who spoke out against the idol worship of Baal, but Jezebel viciously slaughtered many of them and caused the rest of them to go into hiding. Let's stop and talk about Jezebel for a minute, because she's like no other character mentioned in the scriptures. Let's take a deeper look. I did some research. God led me into doing some research. And we as Western thinkers of the Bible, we interpret her to be some lewd woman with power who hates men. That's only a small part of who she was. There's so much more to her. She was from a Phoenician society that was very progressive in their inclusion of women. Phoenician women were raised to be adaptive and assertive within male-dominated cultures. We remember the Syro-Phoenician woman in the New Testament who would not be denied her blessing despite Christ's initial rejection. She remained humble, but yet assertive and faithful. Christ fulfilled her request by casting the demon out of her daughter. Now, let's look back at Jezebel. Even though she lived centuries before the Syro-Phoenician woman, she came from the same culture. The only difference is that Jezebel was of royal descent, well-trained in her practice of religion and the Phoenician way of life. She lived at a time where there was no Roman government to keep her in place. Another thing to understand is that the Phoenician culture was a business-driven culture. When she married Ahab, it was an opportunity for her to stake her claim in the kingdom of Israel for the purpose of expanding the Phoenician religion, culture, and trade. They didn't just get married out of love. I don't even know if they even know what love was back then. This was a business transaction. As an idol worshiper, it was not hard for her to integrate into the Israelite society because they were already worshiping idols when she came on the scene. Let me tell you something about the northern kingdom of Israel. There was a weakness that existed in Israel that made it so accessible for Jezebel. The northern kingdom was not like the kingdom of Judah. In Judah, all the kings came from one bloodline with the Davidic blessing of King David. Israel was a kingdom of circumstance and not a kingdom of destiny. The only reason they existed was because of Solomon's sin. Basically, they were raised to be a reminder of the sin he committed and to be a thorn in the side of Judah. It was evident that they were born out of sin because not one of their kings were righteous. Not one. They didn't have not one king. And I had to keep searching what they had. Not one king. Every last king was wicked, evil, and ratchet. With idolatry running rampant, the condition was set right for Jezebel to take the throne. When she came into power, all the prophets rose up in protest. The question I have is, where were the prophets when Jeroboam set the nation on the wrong course from the beginning? The book of Kings tells us that God had to send a prophet from the kingdom of Judah to oppose him, because there was no one in Israel that would stand up against him. They're silent. They were silent because they was compliant to what he was doing. Because he was a man, first of all, and he was executing their political desires, they did not want to bother him with the need for righteousness. But when a woman, Jezebel, comes to the throne, all the men and all the prophets raise up. Can you see the bias and the sexism here? We as the church must learn from this example set in the Bible. We as the church today cannot remain silent when our favorite politicians and government officials pass laws, regulations, and rules that misleads the church and misleads the nation down the wrong path. As soon as we see the face of the enemy, we should lift our voices up and call out the wrong. See, they let him do wrong, but as soon as she comes, they want to stand up. But by that time, idolatry has set a stronghold in the nation, and it was too late. Only way this could all happen. So when I went here, I began to think about America, because we in the same situation. If you look around, we in the same situation, and I began to wonder and think to myself, how did the government sneak itself into the church? The government has made itself into the church, and the only way that can happen if the religious leaders who were called to do God's work became political and not spirit-driven. So currently, we have religious leaders in the government, while the government is in the church. And they are planning to connect the two together and to combine them as one. Keep your eyes on the times that we are living in. Have we not witnessed in the past few decades, and even now, big name preachers endorsing political parties? The church have become so desperate for immediate change that they have abandoned the great call, the great commission, and have lost faith in the gospel. It no longer believes the gospel has the power to change minds and hearts. They lost all faith in it because they want immediate change, and they want the change to be what they want it to be. It is easier for them to pass laws, rules, and regulations than to live the gospel, to preach the gospel, and to do what actually what Christ required them to do. Because to live the gospel, you must die to yourself. But they're trying to change everybody else and force everybody to obey God when they themselves are rebellious. This is not the true church I'm talking about. This is the apostate church. However, the true church is not completely blameless in this matter. In the midst of the unification of religion and politics, no one from the true church, which is the remnant of God, cried out against what was going on to the point it sent ripple effects throughout the faith community and the political arena. In fact, those who really carry the Spirit of God have been silent and hands off when it comes to religion and politics until recent years, when a certain political movement arose on the scene who knew how to use religion and politics to gain a whole lot of power. When this happened, the true church, the remnant, mobilized in action, but by the time they decided to do something, it was too late. All the righteous, all the religious and political corruption tolerated in the previous years allowed a stronger corruption to push its way into the church and hijack the government. It is a replay of Ahab and Jezebel in modern America. God knew from the beginning, he knew that politics would corrupt his people's worship. So he ordained kings to handle political things, and he ordained priests to handle the things that pertain to worship. The two are supposed to stay separated. In fact, God never wanted a king, because he knew that kings will overstep their boundaries and begin to put their hands on things that did not belong to him, like his worship and his people. God declared in ancient times that church and state must remain separate so his people can offer him a worship that is untainted by the cares of the world. When politics and religion combine themselves together, it opens up the door for Satan to come and sit on the throne of our worship. Ancient Israel may not have worshiped Satan directly, but they worship idols that were manifestations of Satan. Don't you know Satan would take worship any way he can get it, directly or indirectly? It doesn't matter to him. As long as that worship is not going towards God, it's going somewhere else.